Welcome to LFPL's At the Library series, an ongoing podcast featuring author talks, programs, and events at the Louisville Free Public Library. For more information about upcoming events, visit us online at www.lfpl.org/upcoming-events.htm.
Ms. Boulley is a storyteller and proud Chippewa author who writes about her Ojibwe community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A former director of the Office of Indian Education at the U.S. Department of Education, her debut young adult novel, Firekeeper's Daughter, was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. The book was named one of the top 100 YA novels of all time by Time magazine and is currently being adapted into a Netflix miniseries by Higher Grounds Production. So without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Boulley to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonjour, Anin, Angeline Boulley, Nidishnakas, Miskwa Mukwakwe, Nidishnakas, Mukwa Dodam, Bawating, and Donjaba, Chimagwaj. Hello, everyone. I'm Angeline Boulley, Bear Clan, and I'm from the place of the Rapids, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, specifically Sugar Island. It's such an honor to be here with you tonight. My book launched during the COVID lockdown, and it's just so nice to do events in person and see people and connect. So, miigwech, thank you. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll do some question and answer, and then afterwards, I'm happy to stay as long as you want. Sign books. If you don't get your question answered during the Q&A, please feel free to ask me during the signing. So I really want to talk to you about my journey. I actually am on the New York Times bestseller list this week. I'm not on it every week. Thank you. My debut novel came out in March of 2021. I'm number 4 on the list this week. So, yeah. Yes. So I'm going to talk to you about how I got here. I'm pushing this, but I'm going to push this instead. Okay. So for all you Target fans, Target did this special promotion when my book came out. Imagine this across 8 screens in select Target stores. Strong Ojibwe women are like the tide, reminding us of forces too powerful to control. Weak people fear that strength. Nice things that people said.
I'm thinking of my mother when the blast changes everything.
I am thinking of my mother when the blast changes everything. My book starts out, I'm good with the thing. Oh, okay. My book begins, I began as a secret and then a scandal. My own story started much earlier. So I grew up in a small town in southwest Michigan. Like Donis, my dad is Ojibwe. My mom is not Native, and I had a grandmother who did not care for Native Americans at all. But every Saturday, my dad was a truck driver, so he would be gone a lot, and my mom didn't drive. So every Saturday, we would walk and hit the post office, and then the bank, and then the library. And my 4 brothers and sisters, we would all have our tote bags. And at the library, we could check out anything that we wanted as long as we were willing to haul it home. So I remember, of course, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, later the Dana Girls. But I also remembered checking out books about English royalty, roses, architecture. I'm so thankful to my parents for encouraging me to read whatever captivated me. I was 18. I was a senior in high school before I ever read a book that featured a Native main character. And it wasn't until I read it that I realized, wait, I have not read this before. And what I wouldn't give for that hair and skin and yeah. Oh my God. Girl, I was gorgeous. Okay. The reason why representation is so important is because books for children and teens serve as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors by which children and teens see themselves reflected like in a mirror, or others can see into our lives like through a window and step through to experience it in the pages of a book. It helps develop empathy, understanding of people very different from us, yet when we read their stories and feel connected, we feel that we're the same. And that's the beauty, that's the power of what stories do. So Native Americans officially make up like 2% of the US population. If you count people who are like, yes, I know I'm Native, but I'm not enrolled, I'm disconnected, I was adopted out, I don't have a tribal affiliation, we're talking like 4% or 5%. But the University of Wisconsin at Madison, they have this, it's the Cooperative Children's Book Center in the School of Education. They've been tracking diversity data with books for children and teens. Since 2002, they've been tracking books about Native Americans and books by Native Americans. And when they first started keeping that data in 2002, there were like 60-ish books published in that year. But 9 times out of 10, the book was authored by someone who is not Native. Now, the most recent data for 2020, I think they've published, it's a 900% increase. It's like 90% of the books coming out now are written by Native authors. And why this matters is because when I read that book when I was 18, and I was so excited, like, wow, I'm reading about a Native girl, an Indigenous girl. It was a bad book. The representation was horrible. It played on a lot of stereotypes, like she was adopted out, and then she finds out that she has this twin sister and that their mother was this beautiful Indian maiden, daughter of the chief. The chief had so many daughters, evidently. And she ran off with some non-Native guy in a pickup truck and then had these twin babies that ended up getting separated and all of this other stuff. When I finished that book, I felt less than satisfied. And I didn't have the words I couldn't have explained to you why I didn't feel good, but now I do. It was representation. And books for children and teens especially, it's so important to have representation that is authentic, that is accurate, and that is appropriate. Another thing happened when I was 18. Yes, oh my God, that skin, the things I stressed about then. My best friend went to a different school nearby, and senior year, she was like, there's this new guy. I think he's your type. Don't have a type. It rules out a lot of people that are perfectly wonderful. But my type was like these beefy football player. A beefy intellectual was my unicorn. And so she told me about this new guy in her school. And I was like, ooh, tell me more. I'm single and dateless. And yes, I've been like in school with these guys since kindergarten. I'm ready to date somebody else. After a few weeks, she said, you know what? I don't think he is your type. He doesn't play sports. And he hangs out with the really hardcore partiers, like the stoners, the people that are like barely coherent. Okay, that's not exactly on brand for me, so no, I never met him. A month before graduation, she's like, you're never gonna believe it. There was a huge drug bust in their town, and it turned out that the new guy was an undercover cop. Now, this was a couple of years before 21 Jump Street, the original series with Johnny Depp. So for me, the idea that this young-looking law enforcement officer could pose as a high school student to find out who's supplying drugs to kids, that just blew my mind. And I remember thinking, what if we had met? And what if we liked each other? I was raised on all the CBS soaps. So like my brand of storytelling is very much like Friday cliffhangers and little foreshadowing that only the most astute grandmothers can pick out and say, that's gonna happen. And so I remember thinking, what if we had met? What if we liked each other? And what if he needed my help? And then I thought, well, why would some undercover drug investigation need the help of an ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl? Well, I went to college. I was the first person in my family to go away to college. Funny story, freshman orientation, my parents came with me, and the incoming freshmen were in one dorm, and the parents that could come were in this other dorm. And you could see from the elevator areas of both dorms, you could kind of see across to the other dorm. I'm waiting with my orientation group at the elevator up on one of the upper floors, and someone goes, oh, look at those two kissing. And I looked, and it was my mom and dad, like, making out in front of the elevator. So, yeah, orientation. I think they had more fun than I did, but yeah, this is my grandma, my Nokomis, my Ojibwe grandma, who passed about 6 months after I graduated. And I'm just so glad that she was able to see me graduate and be at the ceremony. So after graduation, I ended up working for a tribe that was like 3 miles away from where I went to college. And I worked with middle school students. And my eyes were open to a lot of things. Now, where I grew up in this really small town in Michigan, we were the only Native family. So what people thought about Native Americans was what they thought about the Boulley family. My mom was in the PTA. We played sports and did the school play and all of that stuff. So it was a generally positive view. But every summer we would go to Sugar Island, off of Sault Ste. Marie, where my cousins and my grandparents would be. And I was very aware that my cousins' experiences in school were very different from mine. And the darker their skin tone, the more awful their experiences were. I ended up working for 3 different tribes, including my own. I worked as a student parent advocate in the schools. I ended up as tribal education director. But whatever my title was, I always wrote grants. And I would start to see different situations in different communities that I worked in. And I thought, that spark of an idea, I thought, what if it was a federal investigation, a federal drug investigation on a reservation? And what if the drug was something that had a recipe that could be manipulated? And what if what it was manipulated with was something that had a cultural component? And what if that 18-year-old girl knew about chemistry, was a whiz at it, but also knew her culture and language and about traditional medicines, plants as healing medicines? And what if she was connected to everybody and everything in the town? She actually would be the ideal confidential informant for a federal drug investigation on her reservation. So I kind of, over a period of years, kind of worked out this okay, this is how it could happen. Well, whatever my job title was, my degree is not in creative writing. My undergrad is in psychology and management, and my master's degree is in public administration, public policy. I did not do creative writing, but I wrote grants. Every job I've ever had, no matter what my title was, I always wrote grants. And I started to think of myself, I was a storyteller. I just happened to tell stories in 40 pages or less, plus attachments. These grant applications, these proposals that we would submit, they would tell a story about my community and the issue that we wanted to address, why we picked that particular approach, how we would measure how we were doing, and why we should be trusted with the funding. That's all a grant application is. And I thought, I am a storyteller. It's just that my training, my background is so different from any writer that I've ever heard about, but that doesn't make my experience any less valid. So I also, by then, I was 44. I had 3 kids. I was married, working for my tribe, which, it's the most disrespected I have ever been in my career was working for my own tribe. But that's another story. So I think I had a midlife crisis around 44, and I realized there's probably more sand in the bottom of the hourglass than in the top. And if I haven't tried to achieve the dreams and goals that I've always said, that I've always set out to do, what am I waiting for? And so at 44, I decided I'm going to write this story. And I remember talking, so I had 2 sons who were in high school and a daughter who was a preteen. And I remember telling her about this story that I was thinking about writing. And I described it to her. And she was like, Mom, that sounds even better than Twilight. That's some pretty high praise. So I started writing, and my first draft was horrible. But that's the point of first drafts. First drafts are horrible. They're a binary. They're not graded. The standard is, did you finish it or did you not? That's all. Mine was horrible. It was definitely not young adult. I don't know what was going on in my life, but yeah, there are readers who are like, I will pay any amount of money to read that version. I set it aside, and then I read it with fresh eyes. And I saw the things that worked and the things in the story that didn't work. I don't have a background as a creative writer, so I would check out books about writing dialogue, character arcs, different things like that. And then I would decide I'm going to try another draft. I didn't know when I started to write around 2009, I didn't know it would take 10 years. That might have scared me off. I'm glad I didn't know. I only focused on the draft at hand. I remember when I was working for this one tribe, I heard an interview with that Billy Joel did, the singer-songwriter, and he talked about how when he dreamt in music, and he would dream about chords, songs, this, and he would wake up, get to his piano, and play and write down what he had heard before it was lost. And I remember asking one of my friends that worked with me at this one tribe, I was like, what do you dream about? Because I thought that was pretty cool, about Billy Joel. And she told me, I dream in jingle dress dance designs that she pictured, different scallops and different fabrics and different ways of arranging the cones. And I thought, that's incredible. What do I dream about? I dreamt in stories, and I guess I thought everybody did. And then the more that I talked with people about this, I realized, wait, they're not dreaming about plot lines and surprise reveals and cliffhangers and all of this kind of stuff. So maybe I really was a storyteller. So yeah, I started writing, focused on the draft at hand, kept at it, and then I discovered the hero's journey. So when I first discovered it, I thought I discovered something brand new. Yeah, if you don't have a background in creative writing, you think you discovered something incredible, and then you find out, oh yeah, Joseph Campbell wrote a whole book, studied different cultures across millennia, similar formats. And I had one child who loved Harry Potter, and I had one child who loved Star Wars. And when I first learned about the hero's journey, I was like, wait, that's the same story. And I had my kids plot out, there's the ordinary person that gets this call to adventure. And sometimes they refuse the call, or the call is refused by them, by their uncle. And then they meet a wise mentor. They cross over into this new threshold, this unfamiliar world where they face a series of challenges, trials and tribulations, fun and games, if you will. They discover talents that they never knew they had. They also discover friends and enemies. And they're on a quest for something, this magical elixir, this want. They transform, and when they face their final adversary, they're better equipped based on all of these things that they've learned along the way. And whether they're successful or not, because sometimes they get the want and realize that wasn't what they needed. Whether they're successful or not, when they return to the ordinary world, they're forever changed by this journey. And the best thing is to be able to master both worlds. I really thought about it. We see it so much in popular movies, film, and literature. My favorite is Moana. But we see this hero's journey oft repeated. And it got me thinking about we Ojibwe people and other Indigenous people, we have our hero stories as well. So we have this character, he's called Nanabush or Nanabuju, and he's on this quest and he goes around and sometimes he'll meet Rabbit and then you find out like why Rabbit has floppy ears or how Porcupine got its quills. And a lot of times the lessons are at his expense. So he's kind of like a goofball in some ways. But we have this character that's like on this journey, on this quest. And it got me thinking. And as I started to do more research, I had a eureka moment. So I looked at the hero's journey and I saw this visual depiction like this with 4 pizza slices and all the plot points around it. And I don't think I had ever seen it depicted with those quadrants. Right after that, I was searching for something else and I came across the Ojibwe medicine wheel. And this one is by Keweenaw Bay Indian Community in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Now, our Ojibwe medicine wheel teachings are about the 4 traditional colors, the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 sacred medicines, the 4 seasons, the 4 times of day, the 4 stages of life. And seeing it this way, I thought, what if I overlapped it? And that was the day I knew I would get published, because I knew I was going to tell a story, the hero's journey, from an Indigenous female perspective, using the medicine wheel as a cultural framework for that hero's journey. And yes, I knew I'm going to get published and my story will be epic. I have these moments where I'm like, this is going to be epic. I must remember this anecdote for when Terry Gross interviews me on Fresh Air. And then I have other moments where I'm like, yeah, this is just, you are dreaming big, sis. But after 10 years, 8 drafts, like complete rewrite drafts, I ended up with this on Twitter. So something funny happened. There's this thing called Jack Jones Literary Retreat, Literary Arts Retreat. And it was this highly competitive 2-week intensive retreat for aspiring authors. And the requirements, you had to submit a writing sample, but the person in charge of the workshop also said, if you want a career as a writer, you need to have a Twitter handle and you need to have an author website. And so I remember it was like this one weekend I got my tax refund and I spent the weekend making my author website. Well, I didn't get picked for that retreat, but I still have my author website. So sometimes rejection, there's still gains from it. So I was on Twitter, and there was this Twitter pitching event where one day it's a hashtag DVPit, Diverse Voices Pitch. You tweet out your elevator pitch of your manuscript, and if an agent or editor likes it, it's considered an invitation to query them. So that day, April of 2019, when 18-year-old Donis witnesses the murder of a loved one, she must use her science geekery and knowledge about her Ojibwe culture to protect her tribal community before she loses anyone else. I had 60 literary agents like that and 20 editors at publishing houses. It took me one whole month to research all 60 agents and come up with my dream list. But once I started querying, okay, so you hear the expression, hurry up and wait. My journey was the complete opposite. It was this very, very long path to get to the top of the first peak of a roller coaster that, like, when you're up there and you're like, you hear that like clink, 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 and then it takes off. That was my experience. All of this time percolating this idea, writing drafts. I had an agent within 2 weeks. I had a book deal 2 weeks after I went out on submission. There were 12 editors from Big 5 publishing companies interested. There was a book auction. I received the highest advance that a native author has received, a debut author. Yeah. I received the biggest advance of the year of any young adult author, native or not. And I think there's things that I think about in my journey, the things that I could control. I could control the time that I spent writing, the research that I did, my determination to stick with it. Those are things that are within my control, and I did those pretty well. But with becoming an author, there's so much that's not within your control. You don't know what the market's going to be in 2 years or 5 years. If you try to write for the market, you're chasing tired stories. I happened to get the golden ticket of publishing, and it was that rare combination of my doing everything I could do, meeting with the young adult market that was primed and ready for a mystery thriller featuring a strong Indigenous female protagonist. I hit the lottery, yeah. But wait, there's more. So 2 weeks after my incredible book deal, I sold the film rights to the Obamas. So Hollywood came calling right after my book auction. And I had 8 production companies that were interested in my book, either for a feature film or a series. And when I met with these companies, I met with them via conference call, and I would say the same thing to all of them. I said, my core value is representation, and that means having native creative talent, not just in front of the camera, but in the writer's room, behind the camera, and at every level of production. That's what I care about. There was one guy from one production company, and he goes, "Are there even any native screenwriters?" And I thought, that's like showing up for a job interview and being like, "So what do you do here?" And I thought, I will not do Native 101 with this company. They don't get it. When I had the call with the executives from Higher Ground, it was the complete opposite experience. They were like, absolutely, that's our core value too. These are the networks of Indigenous screenwriters that we're already tuned into. These are people that we're interested in approaching. And if you have any names you want us to consider, please send them forward. And I thought, yes, they get it. Because when you sell the film rights to your book, you give up a lot of control. They can do whatever they want with your story. And so really your only decision is, do you sell, and who do you choose to do business with? And I remember after that call with the executives from Higher Ground, my agent called me, and she's always like, "Can you talk?" Well, yeah, I'm going to take her call. And she said, "I didn't want to tell you this before you talked with Higher Ground, but they don't move forward unless both Barack and Michelle are on board. And I just wanted to let you know that Barack Obama is going to be reading your manuscript this weekend." So then I reread my manuscript that weekend. And I was like, did President Barack Obama get to this part in the story? And then I was like, wait, did President Barack Obama read my sex scene? Because I don't know, like, I'm not going to be able to look him in the eye, you know? But my book was published March 16th of 2021. It was supposed to come out 2 weeks earlier, but then I had just moved back from Washington, D.C. to my hometown of New Buffalo, which when I graduated high school, I was like, I will never see you people ever again. There has got to be more to life than a one-stoplight town that turns to a blinking light at midnight. Please. Well, like almost 40 years later, I'm back. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in, and during COVID, I was like, why am I living in Washington, D.C. when everybody I love is in Michigan? So I moved back, and one time I was standing at the checkout line at Walmart, and my agent called, and she's like, "Can you talk?" And I was like, well, yeah, I can talk. And she said, Reese Witherspoon picked your book for her spring young adult book club pick. And I said, okay. And she said, all right. And then she got off the phone, and then I get this text, and it's like, is this a good thing? Do you want to be her pick? Is there a reason that you wouldn't want to be her pick? And I had to call her back and say, I was in the checkout line at Walmart. My 80-year-old dad just got diagnosed with COVID, and given his health conditions, and this was like, we were still trying to figure this out. It wasn't like, oh, I have COVID, I'm, working from home, or I'm, still doing a whole bunch. It was like scary. We honestly thought it was a death sentence. And my 80-year-old mother was determined that she was going to quarantine with my dad and nurse him back to health. So I was at Walmart to pick up food and supplies for my parents. And that's when my agent had called with the news about Reese Witherspoon. So there are so many incredible moments of this journey, and then there are others that bring you up short and remind you of the things that are really important and how things can change in an instant. And I always try to be mindful and respectful of that. There's so much that is not within our control. I was interviewed by Robin Roberts on Good Morning America a few days before my book came out. It was the same day that Jennifer Garner's movie, Yes Day, came out, because she was in the virtual green room with me. And let me tell you, Jennifer Garner at 7 a.m. is more gorgeous than any living creature you have ever seen in your life. I don't even know why they had a makeup and hair person. She wakes up and she is a vision. So I did 3 shots of limoncello and then did my interview with Robin Roberts. So my book debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It has since gone on to be on the list 31 weeks, not all consecutive, I'm off for a couple of months, and then I'm working on book 2. And I was like, my agent emailed me and said, you're number 4. And it was like a big surprise. I was like, wow, that's really great. So this experience has just been incredible with engaging with readers who, Native or not, have connected with this story about this girl. It's an honor to connect with readers. My book has won awards, and it matters to me because my advance was the largest advance any Native debut author has gotten. I worried that the size of my advance and the amount of financial support, marketing money that my publisher put towards my book, if my book had not performed to expectations, I worried that it would be a very long time before a Big Five publisher took a chance on another unknown debut Native author. And that's the part about this that people who are from a majority culture, who aren't from a marginalized culture, might not grasp, is that it's not just you. If your book tanks, that's what Big Five Publishing thinks of all Native stories. So you basically have this pressure to hit a grand slam your first time at bat, because we don't often get second at bats. So what these awards and being on the New York Times bestseller list, what that means to me is that I have shown a very specific story about a girl from an Ojibwe community in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan can resonate with people. It can be a commercial success, and it can be a literary success. And what I hope is that it shows big publishing to take a chance on more Indigenous stories, because there can be no one great Native American story, because we're not a monolith. My experience, my tribe is very different from other tribes in the country. And so to say, well, this one was good, but what about this other? There's room for more stories. So I will wrap up and take questions. And this is me and my dad. And I reference in Firekeeper's Daughter, I include like a scene where Donna sees a picture of her dad holding her. And she's got like this, head of spiky black hair, and her dad's looking proud. And that's me. And then the day that my book launched, so it was going to be a virtual launch, on March 16th, but the person who was going to interview me, she wasn't available on that Tuesday. Yikes. She wasn't available that Tuesday. She was available on that Thursday. So I thought, I want to launch my book in my tribal community. So I drove up to Sault Ste. Marie. My parents came up, and my book came out, and I was in my community. And so, yeah, that was from that day. So it's been an incredible, incredible journey. And I never knew when I had that spark of an idea when I was 18, when all I was thinking about was the possibility of a cute boy, and that an idea could lead to my entire life and my family's life changing. And so with that, I am open to your questions, because I'm here for you. Okay, questions. I answer everything except what Jamie Johnson's real name is. I know it, but I'm not telling you. I am working on book 2. Next Friday, there's going to be a huge announcement. It's going to be the title and cover reveal. So Google my name and please sign up for that. It's exciting. If my first book was Indigenous Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street, my second book, which is not a traditional sequel, has a different main character, but some familiar faces. I pitch it as Indigenous Lara Croft. where the main character is a 16-year-old girl who, instead of raiding tombs, she's raiding museums to bring our ancestors and sacred items back home. And one of her heists goes very badly. Okay, question. When I got a book deal for $1.5 million, I worked for about 4 months after that, and I made sure that, and so I left a month before COVID lockdown started, and I'm so glad I left when I did, because had I not left then, I would have felt compelled to help through this crisis. But I knew I was leaving on February 14th, and I made sure that I had plans in place, contingencies, hirings, like everything was ready to go. And so I could walk out the door and not look back. That's a great question. They have been overwhelmingly positive about it. And the reason why is because I fictionalized the tribe in the story. So it takes place there, but my tribe is the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. We're like a combination of these historical fishing villages, one of which is Sugar Island Band. So in the book, I made the tribe the Sugar Island Ojibwe tribe. And I think taking that creative license helped. I think it was the smartest decision I made, because my tribe can like the story and not feel personally attacked by anything. And I think that distance of it, that creative license, helped a lot. Did I ever lose hope in writing? Yeah, I went through a divorce during that time. I ended up in a relationship where I never wrote for the 3 years that I was in that relationship with that other person. A lot of things happened, and sometimes I had to set the manuscript aside, but it would be like this whisper that would end up shouting at me, and I would find my way back to it. Sure. So my publisher wanted me to include a glossary, and I pushed back on it, and I said, no. If I do a good enough job as a writer, I want the reader to be able to glean the meanings of the Ojibwe words through context, and they might not know the specific translation, but they get the gist of it. And if they want to know more, there are free language websites that can help them. But I felt like providing a glossary centered it in a non-native gaze. And my goal was to write a story that was indigenous, that was indigenous gaze. I wrote it in first person, present tense point of view, even though it's set in 2004, to drive home the point that we are still here. And so there was intention behind that decision. Just acknowledge that your first draft is probably going to be awful, but write it anyway, because you can't edit a blank page. And you start out just getting the story and getting to the end of the story. There's something that is so, even if you know that it's, but to finish is something miraculous. And then take some time and then look at it and see, where do you want to spend your energy? Do you want to dive back in? So I'm a fan of trying it, because life is short, and why not? I can live with failure. I would rather not live with regret. I did marry someone from my tribe. And 2 of our children are enrolled, and one started out as my nephew, and he's not enrolled. So yeah, it's just a different situation. So, there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you do any research with Indigenous peoples across the globe, you will find stories about little people. It is not specific to Sugar Island. That leads me to think there's something there. My dad, has encountered a little person. They're spirit beings, and they're on Sugar Island. They're in other places too. And my dad was tending fire at this one fasting camp, and he said he saw this little wee woman out of the corner of his eye, and he knew if he went to look at her, she would go away. And he just sat there with her for a little while. And I think it's really hard when you're Indigenous and you're writing stories and you include these parts of your culture, and then it seems like mainstream publishing wants to categorize you as magical realism, but it's real. There's not anything magical. It's like a real thing to people in my community. And the story about the elder who went missing, and then when he was found, said that the little people had taken care of him. That's based on one of my grandma's cousins. That's, And okay, so I have these writer goals, and it's okay, I want to earn out my advance. I want to do this. I want to do that. Okay. But I also want to be a comp title. So when people pitch their manuscript, they're like, this is like Firekeeper's daughter meets, such and such. That's a writer goal. Another one of my writer goals was to be a meme. And I am a meme. There is a meme that's out, and it shows this one kid from Stranger Things, and he's going like this, and then in the next picture he's punching, and they added beaded earrings and a little bandana around him. And it says, when you're the only Indigenous person in your book club and they're discussing Firekeeper's daughter. And the caption is it wasn't the mushrooms, Stacy, it was the little people. And mission, my goal has been met with that. So, other questions in the back there? Actually, it happened sooner than that. So my first job working for a tribal community, it wasn't for my own. It was for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and they were located 3 miles away from where I went to college. So I started working for that tribe, and there were 2 sisters. One was a coworker of mine, and the other ended up being my boss. But these 2 sisters that took me under their wing, and for whatever reason, they welcomed me. They invited me to different events. They shared parts of themselves. And I remembered thinking, I want to be a strong Ojibwe woman like they are. They really had it going on. And I thought, but I'm such a screw up. And the more that we got to know each other, the more they told stories to me. And I realized they were just as screwed up as I was at 24, and that there was hope for me. And I think the power of mentoring and the power of seeing role models in your community, it cannot be understated. And so I try to be so mindful that I want to be, when there are young girls in my community and they see me, I want them to see me building up other people and cheering them on and calling out difficult things and speaking my truth. And those are the things that I want to emulate, because it made such a huge difference to see those examples when I was young. So yeah, Aunt Teddy is based on those two sisters. And they wanted me to date their brother, and yeah, that didn't work. But yeah, I almost was kin. Sure.
People different opinion, different experience, different background. So people sometimes think, what's the successful? Somebody says, I have twins, I'm successful. I'm a lawyer, I'm a writer, I'm successful. For me, the emotion and business together is successful. What's your definition for success?
For me, success is freedom. When I got the book deal, I knew I could quit my job. I knew, there were all these things that I could do. I could go out and buy a car. I could do all these different things. But what really struck me was that I knew that my children, my 3 children, my 3 nieces, and their future children could go to school to study anything that they wanted, and they would never have to incur any student debt. And to me, that's freedom. And that made this book, Money, life-changing. So to me, it's the freedom to be able to say no to things that you don't want to do. It's to help lift up other people. It's the freedom to, pursue more stories and things that you want to do. And definitely support the causes and organizations that are important to me. Because I want to tell his story, I just haven't figured out how to tell Jamie's story. Obviously he was adopted out from his tribe, and there was a lot of trauma, and I'm not sure that the story can be young adult. And I'm just trying to figure out the best way to tell the story. And so I know his name, I know his story. I'm just trying to figure out how to honor people who have been adopted out and have that connection severed. Like how best to tell a story that is 400 years in the making, because there's so many forces at work. It's not just someone got adopted out. It's like, what led to this happening? And why did that happen? And that, and what are the ripples, the repercussions? So it's just trying to figure that out. Yeah. My second book will be out May of 2023, and I wouldn't look for the Netflix series anytime before the end of 2023 or into things take a long time in Hollywood, evidently. So yeah. Are we spoilery or not? Okay. I never felt pressure. I knew from day one how the story would end. And I love my ending. And when I'm feeling doubts about, writing, sometimes I'll read that epilogue and I'm like, yep, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So my tribe has like 44,000 people. We don't have a blood quantum minimum, but we have some other rules that are like kind of, that leave some people on the outside looking in. And about a third of our tribal members live in the Upper Peninsula. Another third live downstate in the Lower Peninsula. And then the other third live like all across the country. And we don't do per capita. That was creative license, wishful thinking. Did I always want to write young adult? Well, that first draft wasn't, and there was another draft where Donis was pretty messed up. But I think once I really understood the story, I knew it had to be young adult, because so much of young adult is about claiming your identity and finding your place in the world. And that is very much young adult. And that was Donis's story. So then I was like, yep, it's going to be young adult. It's very upper edge young adult. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, that's such a good question. Okay, so it was after I got my agent in April of 2019, and I was going to work on a short revision over the summer, and then we were going to go out on submission in 2019, fall of 2019. And I thought, okay, this is happening. This is, I'm going to get like this is going to happen. And I thought, well, what next? Do I have another story in me? And I was like, Donis has been on my mind since I was 18, like in some shape or form. That's all I've ever had. And I thought, you know what? If all I've got in me is this one story, I'm glad I'm making it as epic as possible, and I'm satisfied. And so I was living in DC, and I was walking around this neighborhood, and all of a sudden this voice popped into my head, this feisty character, and she goes, I stole everything they think I did, and even stuff they don't know about yet. And I was like, who is this? Who is this? And more thoughts, like more of her little like commentary came into my mind. And the nearest business was this place called Cheese Teak. And it's this imported cheese deli restaurant and bar. And so I ran into the bar, because when I would go for my Sunday walks, I would just have my driver's license and a credit card tucked into my bra, and I'd have my cell phone and my key, and that was it. And so I ran into that bar, and I go, I need a piece of paper and a pen and a Chardonnay. And I sat there all afternoon writing the stream of consciousness of this 16-year-old girl sitting in a police station. And she's thinking, how did it come to this? And then she's expecting her parents to come and get her. But instead, her Aunt Donis bursts in and says, what did you do? And then like grabs her and hugs her and says in her ear, don't tell them anything. And that was when I knew I had book 2.